The sun glints off the water, a shimmering, peaceful blue. A woman, a self-satisfied smile on her face, glides through the pool's tranquil surface. The shot zooms out, revealing a young person, their face a mask of disbelief and betrayal, holding a steaming cup of coffee. As the woman climbs out and her gaze locks onto the protagonist, her smile twists into a sneer. The piercing wail of a siren echoes in the distance, growing louder, and the protagonist's knuckles turn white around their keys. A furious voice rings out, "Officer! That's him! He's trespassing on my property!" The key felt heavy in Alex's hand, a solid, tangible weight of a past they were still trying to grasp. It was the key to their grandmother's house, a small, unassuming ranch-style home nestled on a quiet cul-de-sac. It was also the key to a future Alex had never planned on having. After months of probate and paperwork, the house was finally theirs. The will had been clear and unwavering. "To my dear grandchild, Alex, may this home bring you the peace and joy it has always brought me." It was a home filled with the ghosts of childhood summers, the lingering scent of grandmom's lemon pound cake, the faint hum of her old sewing machine, the worn-out grooves in the wooden floorboards. Alex had quit their job in the city, packed what little they owned, and made the pilgrimage back to the suburbs. The plan was simple: fix up the place, sell it, and use the money to finally pursue their own dreams. The first phase of the plan involved a lot of elbow grease and a lot of caffeine. For the past 2 weeks, Alex had been living out of a duffel bag on an air mattress, tackling everything from peeling wallpaper to leaky faucets. The heat of the late July sun was relentless, and the old house, without its proper air conditioning yet running, felt like a sweltering tomb. The only thing that offered a reprieve was the pool. It was a relic of the 1970s, a kidney-shaped oasis in the backyard, bordered by chipped concrete and an overgrown mess of bougainvillea. It needed a new liner, a new filter, and a fresh coat of paint, but the water, thanks to a few shock treatments and endless skimming sessions, was a shimmering, inviting blue. Alex had spent hours clearing the skimmers, balancing the chemicals, and dreaming of the day they could finally dive in and escape the oppressive heat. They had earned that swim. It was mid-afternoon, and the air was thick and still. The cicadas buzzed with a manic intensity that felt like a drill boring into Alex's skull. A cold brew from the local coffee shop was a small beacon of hope. They pushed open the sliding glass door to the backyard, the scent of fresh-cut grass and chlorine hitting them. But something was wrong. A splash. A soft, rhythmic sound of someone swimming. Alex's hand froze on the doorframe. Their hearts started a slow, heavy thud. No one was supposed to be here. Not today, not ever. The house had been vacant for months. The neighbors, a silent, elderly bunch, kept to themselves. The sound came again, a gentle churning of water, and then a head broke the surface. A woman. She was middle-aged, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a designer swimsuit that looked completely out of place in this old, tired pool. Her face, a study in self-satisfaction, was turned toward the sky as she floated on her back. "Hello," Alex said, their voice coming out as a strained croak. The woman's head snapped toward the sound. Her eyes, magnified by a pair of expensive sunglasses, narrowed. A frown creased her forehead. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with an imperious tone that made the word help sound like an accusation. Alex stepped fully onto the patio, the cool cup of coffee a stark contrast to the heat rising from the concrete. "I think you're in my pool," Alex said, trying to keep their voice even. The woman pushed herself to the side of the pool, her hands resting on the edge. Her bracelets, golden and chunky, clinked against the concrete. "Your pool? Honey, this pool has been vacant for 9 months. It's been a communal resource for the neighborhood. Carol, bless her heart, always let me use it." Alex felt a surge of cold anger, a sharp, clean shock that cut through the exhaustion. "My name is Alex. Carol was my grandmother, and I just inherited this house. There was no communal resource agreement. My grandmother had a bad back. She barely used it herself." A flicker of something unreadable crossed the woman's face. Not surprise, but annoyance. "Well, that's beside the point. I've been maintaining it while it's been empty. The chlorine, the filters, You think this stays clean by itself? I've been doing you a favor. A favor? Alex scoffed, taking a step closer. The woman pulled herself out of the water, a graceful, practiced movement, and reached for a fluffy white towel. You're trespassing, ma'am. You have no right to be here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Now. The woman wrapped the towel around herself, clutching it tight as if it were a shield. Trespassing? On this property? Do you know who I am? I'm Sharon Peterson. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. Alex felt a bitter laugh bubble up in their throat. I don't care if you're the Queen of England. This is my property. That's my pool. Get off my property before I call the police. Sharon's perfectly manicured nails dug into the towel. Her face hardened, the mask of pleasant superiority cracking to reveal a sharp, vindictive core. Don't you dare threaten me. I've had to deal with your grandmother for years. Always so difficult. So entitled. You are just like her. My grandmother wasn't difficult. She just wanted her property respected. Something you clearly don't understand, Alex retorted, their voice rising with each word. I am giving you one last chance. Get out, Sharon's eyes blazed. Fine. But you're making a huge mistake. A huge mistake. She stalked across the patio, snatched up a pair of pristine flip-flops, and stormed toward the fence that separated her yard from Alex's. As she reached the gate, she paused, turning back. Her mouth was a tight, angry line. She raised a finger, pointing it directly at Alex. You haven't seen the last of me. I'm not going to let a punk like you ruin what I've built here. She then fumbled in her towel, pulling out a phone, and jabbed a few numbers. Hello? Yes, this is Sharon Peterson, president of the Cul-de-sac Homeowners Association. I need to report a trespasser. He's trying to break into a home on our street. Yes, the one at 1445 Juniper. He's aggressive and refusing to leave. Yes, I'll wait for you here. Alex's mind reeled. What was she doing? She wasn't calling the police on them, was she? A cold dread seeped into Alex's bones, a horrifying realization of the absurdity of the situation. They stood there, motionless, the cold coffee cup forgotten in their hand, as the unmistakable sound of sirens grew louder, their shrill cry echoing down the quiet street. They pulled up to the curb, two black and white cruisers with flashing lights, and the officers stepped out, their faces stern and unyielding. One of them, a tall, burly man, strode directly toward the fence line where Sharon stood, pointing. She was pointing at Alex. Officer! That's him! She shrieked, her voice a theatrical, high-pitched wail. He's trespassing! He broke into my grandmother's house and won't leave! The officer's gaze shifted from Sharon's hysterical face to Alex, standing frozen on their own patio. The officer's hand instinctively went to his gun. The world tilted on its axis, and Alex's heart hammered against their ribs. This wasn't happening. Not in their own home. Not in the home they had. The world felt like it was moving in slow motion. The officers, two towering figures in dark uniforms, approached the fence line. Sharon, her face a mask of righteous fury, pointed a shaking finger at Alex. Her theatrics were in full force, her voice a piercing shriek that carried down the street, drawing the attention of neighbors who were now peering out from behind their curtains. Officer! Thank God you're here, she wailed, clutching her towel like a damsel in distress. This man, he broke in! He's threatening me! The taller of the two officers, a man with a tired face and a name tag that read Officer Miller, ignored Sharon's histrionics and fixed his gaze on Alex. Sir, step away from the house with your hands visible. Alex's mind, which had been a whirlwind of panic, suddenly went quiet and clear. They were on their own property. They had done nothing wrong. The only person trespassing, and now lying, was the woman wrapped in a white towel. Alex slowly raised their hands, the cold coffee cup still clutched in one of them. Officer, I live here, Alex said, their voice low but steady. This woman is in my pool. She's the one who's trespassing. Officer Miller's brows furrowed. He glanced at Sharon, then back at Alex. Ma'am, he says he lives here. Can you confirm that? Sharon's indignant gasp was so loud it could have been heard a block away. Of course he doesn't live here. The homeowner, Carol, passed away months ago. This house has been empty. He's a squatter. A vandal. With a coffee cup and a duffel bag? The second officer, a younger woman with a skeptical expression, chimed in, her gaze sweeping over Alex's unassuming appearance. "He's very clever," Sharon shot back, her voice quivering with what she hoped sounded like fear but was pure rage. "He's probably been casing the place for weeks. I saw him lurking around." Alex, still holding their hands up, let out a slow, controlled breath. "Officer, my grandmother, Carol Johnson, left me this house in her will. My name is Alex Johnson. The deed and all legal documents are in my name. I have the key right here." Officer Miller took a half-step closer, his hand relaxing from his holster. "Do you have any ID, sir?" Alex carefully set the coffee cup on a small patio table and reached into their pocket, pulling out a wallet. The gesture was slow and deliberate, designed to show they were no threat. They handed over their driver's license. The officer studied it, comparing the name to what Alex had said, then looked at the address. The address on the license was from a different city, but Alex explained it was a recent move. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, turning back to Sharon, his tone now less commanding and more of a warning. "Can you provide some form of proof that you're the homeowner or have permission to be here?" Sharon's perfectly crafted facade began to crack. Her confident sneer faltered. "Proof? I don't need proof. Everyone knows me. I've lived next door for 30 years. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. We've been taking care of this place for the good of the neighborhood." "Taking care of it?" Alex interjected, a sharp edge to their voice. "She's been using it as her personal pool. There was no agreement. And if she was taking care of it, why are the hedges a foot high and the paint peeling off the trim?" "That's because he just moved in and ruined it," Sharon sputtered, a desperate, wild look in her eyes. "He's making things up." The second officer pulled out her notepad. "Ma'am, this is now a conflicting report. We're going to need to verify ownership. Do you have a key to this property?" Sharon's hand went to the towel, and for a terrifying moment, Alex thought she had the key in there, a twisted act of theft. But she just held the towel tighter. "Of course I don't have a key. I'm not a criminal." Officer Miller looked at Alex. "Do you have the deed or any other paperwork to prove ownership?" "It's all inside," Alex said, gesturing to the house behind them. "The place is a mess from the move, but the paperwork is in the kitchen. I'd be happy to get it if you'll give me a moment." Officer Miller gave a curt nod. "Go ahead. We'll wait out here." As Alex walked back toward the sliding glass door, Sharon's voice followed them, a venomous hiss. "You're not getting away with this, you thief. You're going to jail. Do you hear me? Jail!" Alex ignored her, their hands still trembling slightly as they unlocked the door. Inside, the cool air from a small window unit AC was a relief. The chaos of half-unpacked boxes, drop cloths, and tools was a stark contrast to the manicured, orderly perfection of the street outside. They went straight to a box marked Docs and rummaged through it, pulling out a thick, legal-sized envelope. They took a deep breath, the scent of fresh paper and Grandmom's faint floral perfume a strangely grounding combination. Before heading back outside, Sharon was still spewing insults at the two officers, her face red with frustration. "You believe him? He's a con artist. He's probably a squatter from the city, trying to take advantage of a sweet, innocent community." "Ma'am, please calm down," the female officer said, her tone firm. "We'll sort this out." Alex handed the envelope to Officer Miller. He pulled out the deed, the will, and a recent tax bill. His eyes scanned the documents, his face a neutral, unreadable mask. Then a slow, grim look settled over him. He handed the papers back to Alex. "The documentation looks to be in order, Mr. Johnson," he said, the respect in his voice like a physical blow to Sharon's composure. He turned to her, his expression now one of professional disappointment. "Ma'am, this is not a civil matter. You are on private property without permission. At this point, you're the one who is trespassing." Sharon's jaw dropped. The carefully constructed mask of the wronged neighbor shattered completely. "What? How can you say that?" "I called you. I'm the one who reported this. He's the one who's in the wrong." "Ma'am, you have just filed a false police report," Officer Miller stated, his voice a low, warning rumble. "That's a serious offense. We could take you downtown right now." The color drained from Sharon's face. She finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Her theatrical outrage evaporated, replaced by cold fear. The neighbors peeking from their windows. who moments ago were likely whispering about the trespasser, were now witnessing their homeowners association president, soaking wet in her swimsuit, being threatened with arrest. Wait. No. I didn't know, Sharon stammered, her voice suddenly small and thin. I truly believed the house was still in probate. It was just a misunderstanding. Officer Miller didn't budge. We're letting you off with a warning this time, ma'am. But if we get another call from this address, and it turns out to be another false report, we will be forced to take action. He then turned to Alex. Mr. Johnson, you have every right to press charges. This is your property. Alex looked at Sharon. The woman, who a moment ago had seemed an unstoppable force of suburban entitlement, was now a pathetic, shivering figure, clutching her towel, a mix of shame and rage warring on her face. Alex could have had her arrested. The thought was tempting, a righteous vengeance for all the pain and frustration of the last few months. But something in Alex held them back. This was their home now. Starting off their new life with a lawsuit seemed counterproductive. There would be other battles. I won't press charges, Alex said, their gaze unwavering from Sharon's. Just stay off my property. Sharon gave a tight, resentful nod. She backed away slowly, like a predator who had just been bested, and slunk back toward the gate. The two officers watched her go, their expressions professional, but with a hint of something more. A shared look that said they had seen this kind of petty drama before. Officer Miller turned back to Alex. You handled that well, sir. But be advised. People like her don't take a loss lightly, especially when they're in a position of power. She's not the kind to let a misunderstanding go. He looked toward the house, then back at Alex, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I've dealt with this HOA before. They have a lot of rules and a lot of power on this street. The president? She wields it like a sword. This isn't over, not by a long shot. You've just made yourself the first person on her list. He gave a final firm nod, and the two officers returned to their cruisers. Alex stood on the patio, the quiet of the cul-de-sac returning, but it felt different now. The peaceful, sleepy street was revealed to be a battlefield. The scent of Grandmom's flowers mingled with the lingering tension, and Alex knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that Officer Miller was right. This was just the beginning. The silence that followed the departure of the police was more deafening than the sirens had been. The quiet was thick, heavy with the weight of unsaid things. Alex stood on the patio, the cool breeze a stark contrast to the boiling heat that had consumed them just moments before. The cul-de-sac, once a picture of suburban tranquility, now felt like the eye of a hurricane. The curtains in the surrounding houses had fallen back into place, but Alex could feel the eyes of their neighbors, unseen but present, watching and judging. They were a newcomer, an outsider, and they had just started a war with the neighborhood's self-proclaimed queen. The phone rang, a jarring sound in the stillness. It was their dad. Hey, I just heard from the lawyer, he said, his voice a cautious calm. Everything's official. The deed is registered. The house is officially yours. Congrats, kiddo. Thanks, Dad, Alex replied, their voice flat. Everything all right? You don't sound too happy? Yeah, just a bit of a dramatic welcome committee. Alex recounted the events, their words tumbling out in a rush, a mix of disbelief and simmering frustration. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Alex could almost hear their dad's brain processing the information, picturing the scene. Alex, listen to me, he finally said, his tone serious. You did the right thing. You didn't escalate, you handled it with the law on your side. But that's a mistake people in positions like hers make. They're not used to being told no, and they will come back harder. I know, Alex said, the words of Officer Miller echoing in their mind. The cop said the same thing. Listen, keep your guard up. And for now, let's just focus on getting you settled in. How about I come over this weekend and we can get a start on the pool repairs? My treat. The offer was a lifeline, a tangible show of support. I'd really appreciate that, Dad. Thanks. After they hung up, Alex went back inside. The air mattress seemed less inviting now. The half-unpacked boxes looked less like future potential and more like a sign of their present vulnerability. They needed a plan. They couldn't just stand around waiting for Sharon to make her next move. The time for reactive defense was over. It was time for proactive action. The next morning, Alex woke up early, the sun not yet fully over the horizon. The first order of business was to get the pool in a state where no one would even be tempted to enter it. The existing filter was shot, and the pool liner was a patchwork of fading blue and small tears. Alex found an old, tattered tarp in the garage, a forgotten relic of their grandfather's gardening projects. It was just big enough to cover the pool. They spent the next hour dragging it over the water, securing the edges with cinder blocks and heavy rocks. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it was a clear sign. The pool was closed for business. Just as they finished, a car pulled up to the curb. It was Sharon, dressed in an immaculate white tennis skirt and a visor, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. She gave the tarp a long, lingering look, her mouth a tight, thin line. Then she turned her back and walked a tight, furious line back to her house. The silent message was received. The game was afoot. The real escalation came 3 days later. A formal, official-looking envelope was slid under the front door. The seal on the back was an ornate, gold-embossed HOA with a small, stylized house. Alex picked it up, their heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against their ribs. The letter inside was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese. Subject: Notice of Code and Covenant Violations. Dear Mr. Johnson, this letter serves as a formal notification regarding multiple violations of the Homeowners Association, HOA covenants, conditions and restrictions, CC&Rs, for the cul-de-sac at 1445 Juniper Lane. It has been noted by the HOA board, following a community-wide vote, that your property is in non-compliance with several key regulations. These include, but are not limited to, Section 4.12, Maintenance of Landscaping. Your front hedge is noted to be over 12 inches high, and your lawn is in a state of disrepair. All properties must maintain a pristine and orderly appearance. Section 6.3, Exterior Paint and Repair. Your home's exterior paint is peeling and requires immediate attention to match the aesthetic standards of the community. Section 8.11, Unauthorized Structures and Materials. The blue tarp covering your pool is a non-approved structure and must be removed immediately. You have 14 days from the date of this notice to rectify all listed violations. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $100 per violation, as well as a lien placed against your property. A copy of the full CC&Rs is attached for your review. Sincerely, Sharon Peterson, President, Juniper Lane, HOA. Alex read the letter 3 times, their jaw growing tighter with each pass. A community-wide vote? There was no way that had happened. This was a personal vendetta, thinly veiled under the guise of official procedure. They had been living in the house for less than 2 weeks. The peeling paint and overgrown hedge were the result of months of grandmom's illness, not Alex's neglect, and the tarp was a direct response to Sharon's own actions. A cold, determined fury settled over Alex. Sharon wasn't just petty. She was weaponizing her position of power. She was using the rules, or her interpretation of them, to make Alex's life a living hell. She had lost the first round, and now she was coming back with the full force of her office. Alex went to the kitchen and grabbed a pen and a notepad. There was no way they were going to play her game. They needed to fight back, and they needed to do it smart. The CC&Rs were attached, a thick booklet of small print. Alex spent the rest of the day poring over them, looking for any loophole, any weakness in the armor of the HOA bylaws. They were written in a convoluted, vague language, full of phrases like reasonable standards and community aesthetic. But buried on page 37, Alex found something. Section 11.4, Board Member Recusal. Any board member with a direct personal or financial conflict of interest in a matter under review must recuse themselves from the vote and subsequent actions regarding said matter. The language was simple, direct, and devastating. Sharon had a clear conflict of interest. She had a personal vendetta. She had not only failed to recuse herself, but had clearly used her position to orchestrate a community-wide vote. Alex smiled, a slow, predatory grin. The game had just changed. Sharon thought she was fighting a war of power and intimidation, but Alex was going to fight a war of procedure and paperwork. They were going to use the very rules she was using against them. Alex went to the computer and began typing. It was time for a response. Not an angry, emotional one, but a formal, polite, and professionally lethal one. The first shot in the real war had just been fired, and it was signed by Alex. Alex reread the email one last time, a satisfied smirk playing on their lips. The letter had been a triumph of cool-headed procedure over raw emotional conflict. It was professionally crafted, devoid of personal insults, and meticulously cited the very bylaws Sharon had tried to use against them. The subject line was succinct and damning. Formal challenge to notice of violation and demand for board member recusal. Alex attached a scanned copy of the CC&Rs with Section 11.4 highlighted in bright yellow, a digital sword of Damocles hanging over Sharon's head. With a final click, they sent the email not just to Sharon, but to the generic HOA email address listed in the bylaws, ensuring it would land on the virtual desk of anyone else on the board. The wait was agonizing. For 2 days, the silence was absolute. No email reply, no furious phone call, no slip of a new, more threatening notice under the door. It was as if their letter had completely vanished into the ether. Alex, refusing to be drawn into a game of waiting, continued their work on the house. They weeded the overgrown hedges, a task that now felt less like a chore and more like a strategic victory. They bought paint samples, a small, defiant act of moving forward despite the threat of fines. Every chore was a small rebellion, a way of taking back control. On the third day, a hand-delivered notice arrived. It wasn't in a pristine envelope this time, but a folded piece of printer paper, the creases sharp and angry. The subject line was a single bold word, emergency, dear residents of Juniper Lane. Due to a serious and unforeseen challenge to the authority and operation of our board, an emergency session will be held this Saturday at 10 a.m. in the community clubhouse. Attendance is mandatory for all residents. Topics to be discussed will include, but are not limited to, the recent changes in home ownership at 1445 Juniper Lane and the interpretation of our community's governing documents. Your full cooperation is expected. Sincerely, the Juniper Lane HOA Board. The name Sharon Peterson, President, was conspicuously absent from the signature line. The paper trembled in Alex's hand, a mix of triumph and dread coursing through them. Sharon hadn't responded directly, but she had been forced to react. The serious and unforeseen challenge was Alex's letter. She couldn't ignore the recusal clause. It was too explicit. Instead, she had pivoted, dragging the fight into the public arena in front of the entire neighborhood. The meeting wasn't about the violations anymore. It was about her power. It was a clear attempt to turn the community against Alex and validate her own authority. Alex's dad called that evening. "Did you get the notice?" he asked, his voice a low, knowing murmur. "I just saw an email from the lawyer about the HOA's emergency meeting notice. They got a copy, too. Looks like you hit a nerve." "She's trying to make this a public execution," Alex said, the apprehension creeping into their voice. "She's going to stand up there and twist the truth in front of everyone." "Exactly," their dad replied. "But here's what you're going to do. You're going to show up. You're going to be calm. You're going to have your documents, and you're going to show the neighborhood who she really is. People don't like being manipulated. And believe me, that emergency meeting notice, it already sounds like she's on the defense." The day of the meeting dawned clear and uncomfortably bright. The community clubhouse was a small, dusty building with fluorescent lights that buzzed with an irritating hum. The chairs were arranged in a tight semicircle, and as Alex walked in, a hushed silence fell over the room. Faces, familiar and unfamiliar, turned to stare. Alex saw Mrs. Gable from 2 doors down, a kind-faced woman who had brought their grandmother soup. She offered a quick, sympathetic nod. Mr. Chen, a reclusive man who lived across the street, just stared, his expression unreadable. And then there was Sharon, seated at a small table at the front of the room, flanked by 2 other board members. a nervous-looking man, and a severe-looking woman. Sharon's posture was ramrod straight, her expression a mask of chilly professionalism. "Welcome, everyone," Sharon began, her voice a practiced, saccharine tone that grated on Alex's nerves. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a serious matter to discuss today." She then launched into a long, rambling monologue about the sanctity of the community's standards and the importance of upholding property values. She never mentioned Alex by name, referring to them only as the new resident at 1445 Juniper. She detailed the supposed violations, the hedges, the peeling paint, the unauthorized tarp, and painted a picture of a negligent homeowner threatening to bring down the whole neighborhood's aesthetic. When she finally finished, she opened the floor for questions. A few residents, clearly her allies, asked scripted questions that validated her points. Then Alex raised their hand. "Yes, Mr. Johnson," Sharon said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I have a few questions, actually," Alex said, their voice clear and calm, cutting through the tense air of the room. "First, was there in fact a community-wide vote to issue that notice of violation as your letter claimed?" Sharon's perfect composure faltered for a second. "That's how we always proceed," she said smoothly, a lie so practiced it was almost believable. "The board acts on behalf of the community's general sentiment. And that general sentiment was determined in a vote you presided over?" Alex pressed on. "I am the president of the board. Yes," Sharon said, her voice tightening. "I see. My second question is for the other members of the board," Alex said, turning their attention away from Sharon and towards the nervous man and the severe woman. "Were you aware of Section 11.4 of the CC&Rs before this notice was issued?" The two board members looked at each other and then at Sharon. The silence in the room was absolute. Sharon glared at them, a silent threat passing between them. The severe woman cleared her throat. We were aware of the bylaws, of course. And did you, a resident of this cul-de-sac and a neighbor of mine, formally recuse yourself from the vote as required by the bylaws, given your documented personal conflict of interest?" Alex asked, turning back to Sharon. The word documented a small, sharp pinprick in her facade. Sharon's face went white. Her eyes darted around the room. She had been so confident, so focused on making a public display of her power, that she had forgotten the one thing she couldn't escape, the truth. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The nervous man on the board, emboldened by Alex's directness, finally spoke up. There was no formal vote, Mr. Johnson. Sharon brought the issue to us and we agreed, but there was no community-wide vote." A murmur went through the crowd. The quiet hostility that had filled the room suddenly shifted. Eyes, once directed in judgment at Alex, now turned to Sharon, who was finally, in public, being exposed as a fraud. The very authority she so desperately craved was crumbling before everyone's eyes. It was a powerful, karmic moment, the truth laid bare. The woman who had falsely accused Alex was now being forced to confront her own lies. The stage was set, and the tables had just been completely turned. The silence in the community clubhouse was so profound it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. Sharon's face, which had been a mask of professional outrage, was now a pale, trembling canvas of shock and humiliation. The nervous board member, his voice still echoing with his accidental truth, looked at his feet. The severe-looking woman stared straight ahead, a statue of disapproval. All eyes, which had moments before been fixed on Alex as the troublemaker, now turned to Sharon, a silent and damning judgment. No one spoke. The facade of the HOA, of a board acting for the good of the community, had been ripped away, exposing the ugly truth of a personal vendetta. Alex stood their ground, their heart hammering with a mix of adrenaline and righteous triumph. It was a victory, but a hollow one. The tension was thicker than ever. Sharon, unable to withstand the collective gaze of her neighbors, finally moved. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a loud clatter. Without a single word, she swept up her papers and, with a final, furious glare at Alex that promised a reckoning, stalked out of the clubhouse. The other two board members followed, muttering hushed goodbyes to the crowd, leaving the residents alone with the aftermath. Slowly, the murmuring began. At first it was quiet, then louder, a wave of whispers that washed over the room. Alex saw a few of Sharon's staunch allies whispering to each other, their faces a mixture of confusion and disappointment. But then, an older woman with kind, weary eyes, the one who had given a sympathetic nod earlier, approached Alex. It was Mrs. Gable. "That was a brave thing you did." "Dear," she said, her voice a gentle balm. "Thank you for doing it." "That woman. She's been running this neighborhood like her personal fiefdom for years. No one's ever had the courage to challenge her." She placed a hand on Alex's arm. "My name is Helen Gable. My husband and I live at 1448. Don't you worry about those fines. She doesn't have a leg to stand on anymore." Another person approached, a tall, older man with a long, flowing white beard and a contemplative look. It was Mr. Chen. "The truth. It is like water in a broken dam," he said in a low voice, a subtle accent coloring his words. "It will find its way through no matter how many rocks you place in its path. You have a good heart, young man. Don't let her poison it." He gave a small, reverent bow and walked away. Alex felt a wave of relief wash over them, a sense that they weren't alone after all. They had won this battle, and in the process, they had earned a few unexpected allies. The other neighbors began to disperse, some offering hesitant smiles, others just giving a respectful nod. The tide had turned. Alex left the clubhouse feeling lighter than they had since arriving, the weight of the past 2 weeks finally beginning to lift. That evening, a knock came at the door. It was Helen Gable holding a covered casserole dish. "It's beef and noodles," she said with a warm smile. "My husband always says it's my recipe for mending fences. And I figured you had a few to mend today. Don't worry about paying me back, just eat. You look like you could use a good meal." The simple gesture of kindness was almost overwhelming. It felt like a small, quiet treaty between old neighbors and a new one. Alex went to bed that night with a sense of peace. The world felt right again. They had faced down the bully, won the first round, and found a few people in the process who saw them as a person, not a problem. They drifted off to sleep, their dreams untroubled for the first time in a while. The next morning, the peace was shattered. The phone rang at dawn. It was Helen Gable, her voice high and panicked. "Alex! Alex, I'm so sorry to bother you, but you need to come outside right now. Look at your house." A cold spike of dread shot through Alex's veins. They scrambled out of bed, threw on a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and raced to the front door, pulling it open. The sight was like a punch to the gut. The entire front yard was a disaster. The bushes they had so meticulously trimmed were now hacked and torn, with jagged branches jutting out at odd angles. The beautiful blooming hydrangeas their grandmother had loved were decapitated. Their vibrant blue heads scattered across the lawn like so many fallen victims. A thick, dark, oily-looking substance had been poured all over the grass, leaving a long, winding trail of destruction that ended in a dark, ominous stain on the front steps and spray-painted on the new, pristine coat of white paint on the front door was one. Single furious word scrawled in angry red letters: "Traitor."